There is a type of physical presence that the camera finds before the actor has done anything at all, before the first line, before the first gesture, before the first decision about how to inhabit a scene. The body itself makes a statement, and the statement is so clear and so complete that the audience receives it as information rather than performance. Burt Lancaster had this presence in a degree that almost no actor in Hollywood history has matched. He walked onto a set and the geometry of the room changed. Not because he was tall, he was 6 feet, unremarkable by Hollywood standards, but because the body moved with a specific coiled authority that suggested it was capable of things that ordinary bodies were not. This was not metaphor. He was actually capable of things that ordinary bodies were not. Burton Stephen Lancaster was born on November 2, 1913 in East Harlem, New York City, the fourth of 5 children of a postal worker and his wife. The neighborhood was rough in the specific way of New York working-class neighborhoods in the 1910s and 1920s, physically demanding, competitive, not particularly forgiving of weakness. Lancaster was not weak. He was athletic from early childhood, with a naturalness that suggested it was constitutional rather than cultivated. A body that wanted to move, that found in movement a kind of expression that the classroom or the street corner could not provide. He discovered acrobatics at the Union Settlement House, a community center in East Harlem that offered gymnastics training to neighborhood kids. And he discovered simultaneously that he was very good at it, better than good, in the way that occasionally happens when a physical aptitude meets a temperament that is willing to work at it without limit. He trained, he practiced, he developed the upper body strength and the spatial awareness and the absolute physical confidence of someone who has spent years doing things with his body that most people consider impossible. He attended New York University on an athletic scholarship, but left before graduating, drawn back to the acrobatics that had always felt more like a vocation than a hobby. He formed a circus act with his childhood friend Nick Cravat, a small, gifted acrobat who would follow Lancaster to Hollywood and appear in several of his films, always in roles that required no dialogue because Cravat's speaking voice did not match the image. Together, they performed in circuses and vaudeville theaters and WPA shows during the Depression years, working the circuit with the professionalism of men who understood that the act was their livelihood and that the livelihood depended on the act being perfect every single time. The war interrupted everything as it interrupted everything. Lancaster served in the Army Special Services, performing shows for troops in North Africa and Italy, and returned to civilian life in 1945 at the age of 31 with no particular plan and no particular prospects. He was discovered, the word again, and again it implies more accident than was present, by a theatrical agent who saw him in a building elevator and recognized something in the face and the body that was worth pursuing. Within a year, he had a screen test. Within 2 years, he had made his first film. Within 3 years, he was one of the biggest stars in Hollywood. The speed of the ascent was not accidental. He had arrived in Hollywood with something most young actors spend years trying to acquire, an absolute physical self-possession, a complete comfort in his own body, the specific confidence of a man who has performed dangerous things in front of crowds and learned that the body, when properly trained, does not betray you. He did not need the camera to make him real. He was already real, fully and completely, and the camera caught that reality and transmitted it without distortion. The films of the late 1940s and early 1950s established the template, and then, one by one, complicated it in ways that surprised everyone who thought they had understood what Burt Lancaster was for. The template was the physical hero. The Killers in 1946, the same source material that had launched Ava Gardner, introduced him as a man whose magnificent passivity in the face of approaching death was itself a form of action, a choice made by a body that had decided to stop fighting. Brute Force in 1947, I Walk Alone, Kiss the Blood Off My Hands, film noir pictures that used the body as the primary expressive instrument, that understood that a man who moves the way Lancaster moved communicated things in action that other actors required dialogue to approximate. He performed his own stunts as a matter of principle and preference, not as a publicity strategy, but because the stunts were extensions of what his body already knew how to do, and because handing them to a double felt like handing away the most honest part of the performance. He swung from rigging on film sets with the ease of someone who had spent a decade swinging from circus rigging. He fought with a physical commitment that stuntmen on his films recalled with a combination of admiration and wariness. He was precise, controlled, but the precision was the precision of someone whose body had genuine capability behind it, and the capability occasionally made itself felt. The Crimson Pirate in 1952, a swashbuckling adventure made with Nick Cravat that was essentially a circus act filmed on a movie budget, was pure joy, the acrobat and the actor occupying the same body simultaneously, and the audience felt the joy because it was real. But the same year brought Come Back, Little Sheba, in which he played an alcoholic husband of heartbreaking vulnerability, and the critics who had categorized him as the muscular hero had to revise their notes. From Here to Eternity in 1953 contained the moment that became the image: Lancaster and Deborah Kerr on a Hawaiian beach, waves breaking over them, locked in an embrace that the censors of the era found troubling and that audiences found unforgettable. It is one of the most reproduced images in cinema history, and what makes it work is not the romance of the setting, but the physical reality of the man in it, the sense that this body is genuinely present, that the embrace is genuinely felt, that nothing about the moment has been managed into safety. He won the Academy Award for Best Actor in 1960 for Elmer Gantry, playing a charismatic, corrupt evangelist with a physical and emotional extravagance that made the screen feel barely large enough to contain it. It was the performance of a man who understood that the character's power came from the body before it came from the words, that Gantry's hold over crowds was fundamentally physical, a matter of presence and projection, and the specific electricity that radiates from someone who has spent their life learning to fill a room. Lancaster knew exactly how that felt because he had been filling rooms since East Harlem. He was also, which the image of the physical hero obscured, a man of genuine political seriousness. He co-founded the production company Hecht, Hill, Lancaster with Harold Hecht and James Hill, and the company produced films with an independence and a social engagement unusual for Hollywood in the 1950s, including Marty, which won the Academy Award for Best Picture in 1955, and which was exactly the kind of small, honest, unglamorous human story that the studio system had no interest in and that Lancaster's company made anyway. He was a committed civil rights supporter, one of the speakers on the March on Washington in 1963, a man who used his platform with the deliberateness of someone who had thought about what platforms were for. The late career is where Burt Lancaster became something that transcended the categories the early career had established. Directors who would not have thought to cast the muscular hero of the 1940s found in the Lancaster of the 1960s and 1970s an actor of extraordinary subtlety and range, someone in whom the physical power had not diminished but had been joined by something slower and deeper, a quality of accumulated experience that the earlier films had not yet had access to. The Leopard in 1963, directed by Luchino Visconti, was the film that announced this transition most completely. Visconti cast him against the expectations of everyone who knew Visconti's preference for European actors and everyone who knew Lancaster's reputation as the American action star, as Prince Don Fabrizio Salina, the aging Sicilian aristocrat watching his world dissolve in the wake of Italian unification. It was a role of almost entirely interior drama, requiring the actor to communicate the weight of history and the acceptance of mortality through presence rather than action, through the face and the stillness rather than the body and the movement. Lancaster gave a performance that Italian critics, European art house audiences, and eventually the world recognized as one of the great achievements in cinema. Visconti said afterward that he had been right and everyone who doubted his casting had been wrong, that Lancaster had understood the prince from the inside, had found in himself the specific quality of a man who has been powerful and is watching the power become irrelevant, and had played it without sentimentality or self-pity, with dignity, with the acceptance that dignity requires. Atlantic City in 1980, directed by Louis Malle, gave him Lou, an aging, small-time gangster clinging to the myths of his own past in a city that was reinventing itself without asking his permission. He was 66 years old, and the performance contained everything the career had been building toward: the physical authority now tempered by time, the self-possession now touched with something that knew its own limits, the man and the body finally fully the same thing, rather than the body being the instrument and the man being what used it. He suffered a stroke in 1990 that significantly impaired his speech and ended his acting career. He died on October 20th, 1994, in Century City, California, at the age of 80, with his companion at his side and his children nearby. He had been from the East Harlem tenement to the circus ring to the Hollywood soundstage to the international art film entirely himself. Physical, political, serious, funny, capable of extraordinary gentleness and extraordinary force, and always, always the most interesting body in the room. The circus acrobat never left him, not in the beach scene and not in the Leopard, and not in Atlantic City and not at the end. The body that had learned in East Harlem that it was capable of remarkable things carried that knowledge through 80 years and into the final frame. He proved what needed proving, that strength and depth are not opposites, that a man who can swing from the rigging can also carry the weight of history in his face, that the body, when it belongs to the right person, is not a limitation on what the actor can do. It is the instrument through which everything becomes possible.